Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. So this is a very late monthly wrap-up video. This one is for June, and by the time I post this video it's already like the towards the end of July. Well, I am recording this video on 23rd of July, so yeah, that is pretty late. But you know, I also think the upside of that would be perhaps I might have some new thoughts, new opinions, or whatever brewing in my head, just, you know, stay there, fermented since June, about, you know, the books that I read in that month. Also about this video, because I actually did something like a mid-June reading wrap-up, where I actually talked about books that I've finished until the middle of June. I already have that video uploaded, and I will have the link in the description box below, and I will not repeat what I think about those books in this video, so that, you know, this video is not going to be that long. Anyway, I'm gonna have that link down below, but basically I read 5 books in the first half of June, and you know, my responses to those books were quite mixed. I really loved The Color Purple by Alice Walker, and also Intan Paramaditha's short story collection Apple and Knife, and I also read Kazuo Ishiguro's A Pale View of Hills, which I felt was kind of like so about. It was okay, it was nicely written, but I wouldn't say that it really impacted me like really strongly, even after like 1 month, more than 1 month after I finished reading it. I read Muriel Sparks' The Driver's Seat, and that one was not, that one did not work for me. Like, I wasn't really like crazy about it. I gave it 1 star. And then the 5th book that I read in the first half of June was The Phone Box at the Edge of the World by Imai Messina. That one was kind of like, you know, those cutesy, whimsy kind of a book with a bit of a inspirational vibe to it. It's about the but it's about a couple of people trying to deal with their grief over losing their loved ones. I like the premise, but it was not, it didn't work for me. Like, I gave 2 stars for that. As to the reasons why I love or dislike these books, any of these books, you can check out that video. So in this one, I'm only going to talk about the 2 books that I read in the second half of June. I would think that I would have read something like, you know, 5 books in the second half, but no, it's only going to be 2 in this video. Anyway, so the first one that I read right after the 5 that I finished, you know, was Elif Shafak's The Island of Missing Trees, which was actually one of my most anticipated reads of, well, 2021, but then I got this book late, so it, you know, for this year. I you know, if you don't know this, I would say that I'm a big fan of Elif Shafak's writing. I really like her previous books. I've read all of them except for The Flea Palace, which I hopefully will get to this year. And I would say that I really liked much of her works. I mean, some of the novels weren't like really, you know, spectacular, but I would still rate them fairly highly. This one is unfortunately a dud. Basically, The Island of Missing Trees, we sort of have 2 timelines in this book. So the first timeline is taking place somewhere in the present, where we have Ada, who is living in the UK with her father. Her father's name is Kostas. He is an immigrant from Cyprus, and basically he came to the UK together with his wife. His wife's name is, let me check very quickly, I can't really remember, Daphne. So his wife's name is Daphne. So basically Ada is like the daughter of immigrants living in the UK, and one day while she is in class, in the classroom, she screams when she is asked a question, something about, you know, family history, kind of question by her teacher, and so she screams, and we the story is kind of like trying to take us into why Ada does that. And at the same time, there is also the second timeline where we explore the history of Ada's parents, Kostas and Daphne. So basically Kostas is a he belongs to the Greek Cypriot community, while Daphne belongs to the Turkish Cypriot community, and we get to see the history and the tension that that sort of affects the relationship between these two communities in Cyprus, and the kinds of violence that happened, that transpired in the history following the island's history with colonization, and also, you know, just all sorts of things that happens in the past, and how they kind of affects the relationship between these two people, and how their community reacts to the relationship. Basically, it's a lot of dramatic things, but the thing is, this book, you can really see the passion in it, in its you know, its own way, in trying to tell us the story, especially when it comes to the history of Cyprus and the conflicts between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. But at the same time, it feels very heavy-handed. Like it often delves into the history of the island in a way that impedes the flow of the story. But I wouldn't say that that is the biggest issue with this book. This book also includes a kind of like sections of narratives that are narrated by a fig tree, which personally is not really like a big deal for me. Like, you know, there are a lot of books where things are narrated by non-human characters, or even non-animal characters, you know, in this case a plant. But the issue that I felt with this was the way that the plant narrates things. First of all, it feels like a lot of info dumping. The plant narrates a lot, includes a lot about the history of Cyprus, for example, in its narration, which is okay, but sometimes it feels more like a non-fiction kind of a narrative, because it doesn't really supports the main plot in a way that contributes towards the story, you know, if that makes sense. In addition to that, the fig tree will also include infos on plants and animals, natural world and ecosystem, which also feels very info dumpy to me, and it just doesn't help with the story at all. And third, the fig tree, the fig tree basically exists in the story as a physical thing. Like, the fig tree is a tree planted by Kostas, a character. So you can sort of say that the fig tree is an actual entity in the story. It's a You can consider the fig tree as a character, because the fig tree has a voice and the fig tree has a physical presence in the story. So when you have a character that has a very Mary Sue-like voice, like the fig tree, it gets very grating. Basically, the fig tree is unbelievably PC, I would say. It's but at the same time it also feels kind of self-righteous. There's this smug feeling from the fig tree that that I could get. It seems like this fig tree feels a little bit more like, I don't know, sadly virtue signaling, because you know, it's just a fig tree existing there, growing, and you know, this fig tree has a voice. So basically what the fig tree does is that the fig tree only talks and does three things. So the effect that it gives to this whole novel just feels kind of off to me. It feels kind of off-putting. So yeah, that's my main complaint about this book. I would say that I appreciate the kinds of experimental writing that the author tries to incorporate in this book. Like she has been including like I wouldn't say highly experimental, but there is some degrees of experimentation when it comes to the form in her previous books as well. You can see that from 10 minutes 38 seconds in this strange world, where she sort of deals with timelines and seconds and minutes and stuff, and arrange the chapters by like that. We can also see like experimentation in the gaze, which I think is quite interesting, the way like different chapters just sort of weave into each other in interesting ways, surprising ways. And also in 40 Rules of Love, where we get to see like kind of like the novel in the novel kind of form being included. It's not like highly original, but I feel that in that novel it sort of works. So yeah, I appreciate this, but I don't think it really works when it comes to the portrayal of the fig tree. The overall vibe that I got from this book is that it feels very cheery, which is kind of jarring when you consider the more turbulent and I would even say violent history of Cyprus that it tries to tell in this novel. So yeah, that's kind of strange, but yeah, this book feels a little bit too saccharine to me, or or at least too saccharine to be what I expect from a book by Elif Shafak. So that's all I'm gonna say about The Island of Missing Trees so far. I think that the video has gone a little bit too glaring, so I'm gonna try to adjust something. Oh, okay. Alright, so I'm gonna move on to the next one, the second book that I'm going to talk about in this video, and that is Rubyfruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown. So yeah, one can say that I read this book because of June, Pride Month. Yay, thematic. But I've always been wanting to read this book, but I'm not sure why I've been postponing that. Since I actually got it, like, it has a really beautiful cover. But yeah, I think that Rubyfruit Jungle is an interesting book with an interesting voice, which is definitely something that I really value in books in general, especially novels. I really value voice. So what happens in Rubyfruit Jungle is that we have this character named Molly Bolt, and Molly Bolt, she grows up in this kind of like a poor family, and the story starts when she's still a young girl. I think the story takes place sometime in the first half of the 20th century. But basically she grows up in Florida with her family, and they sort of the life is sort of their economical situation is that they're a bit poor, and later Molly discovers that she's actually adopted by this family. Now Molly has always had this like really strong personality. She's really stubborn. She sort of knows what she wants, and she's not afraid to say it. She is, not like other girls. in that she doesn't really want to do things that are conventionally expected from a girl at that time, and so that leads her to have this really wrought relationship with her adopted mother. Like she would get yelled at and beaten by her mother because she wouldn't listen to what her mother says. She would do things that her mother really dislikes. Her mother expects her to be like a, you know, this kind of like ladylike person, but she is not. So that's one aspect of Molly Bolt as a character that is quite important in the story. Like she has this really strong personality. Like she just do whatever she wants. And another one is that she discovers that she is particularly attracted to women since she is very young. And so you know, this book mainly explores that side of her. It kind of explores her in, you know, how she navigates her her life as a young person with respect to her, you know, not only to her, you know, really different personality, but also her sexuality as well. And we see the novel explore that through her experimentation as a young girl with, and she starts to experiment with, you know, with having sex. She experiments with having sex with her schoolmates, both boys and girls alike, her friends. Basically, she doesn't like have sex with anyone, but she tries to have sex with her friends, and you know, that theme sort of recurs in this book. Like we would eventually see when she grows up, she becomes a teenager and she becomes a young woman, when she eventually leaves her small town in order to pursue higher education at a college, and what happens after that. But something that keeps on happening is basically her kind of like sexual awakening in a way, although at the same time Molly is also presented as a character who is already quite secure in her sexuality and stuff. And so what we keep seeing is that she has sex with people, which for me is okay. I mean, the only complaint I have when it comes to sex in books is that they tend to be boring, which is why erotica doesn't work for me. And I would say that this book has a lot of sex. I wouldn't say that, you know, 80% of the sex is sort of okay. It sort of contributes something to the story, but there are parts of that sort of feels like the story starts to go off, you know, off tangent, and it just doesn't work with the storyline. Hello, welcome back. So sorry for that interruption. Fast forward 10 hours later, here I am. Yeah, let's get back to Rubyfruit Jungle. So I think where I left off in the previous footage was about something that that sort of went off tangent in this book when I was reading it, and yeah, it was actually a plot point. I'm not sure if plot point is a correct word, because I don't feel that particular scene or incident that happened in this book really fits with this overarching plot line with Molly in this book. But there was actually this kind of like incest related incident that sort of happens with Molly. I'm not gonna go into detail as to what happens in this book, but I think that part just didn't fit with the overall story in here. Obviously, if you find that topic to be, you know, if you feel squeamish about it, consider this as a trigger warning, because there is definitely elements of incest in that particular part of that book, which I think really feels like it interrupts the flow of this book, and it sort of makes this book feels more like an autobiography. Not exactly make this book feel autobiographical, but I mean, I think this book is sort of semi-autobiographical in its kind of like conception, but the inclusion of that particular incident in the story of the novel sort of makes it feel like autobiography, in the sense that you know, it includes something that totally just doesn't really works with the whole work in a novelistic way, if that makes sense. But something related to that, and also, you know, my thoughts, another thoughts about this book is that because it has that kind of autobiographical vibe to it, the voice in this book feels very real to me. Like, I feel like someone is actually narrating their life story to me, and their story is presented as something that is not particularly perfect, as in, you know, perfect in a, again, novelistic sense. It's raw, and there is definitely some kind of character development, you know, some kind of change that happens with the character, but it happens in a way that feels sort of chaotic, and also not exactly, you know, perfect as in, you know, when you end this book, you feel like you feel that sense of catharsis that usually comes whenever you see something that feels satisfying happen to a character. That does not exactly happen here, but you can still get that sense of change in this book, which is something that I feel really shows it really highlights the sincerity in this book. The voice is yes, sincere, it's honest, and you can also feel the passion in the storytelling. So definitely, you get that fire from this book. So I actually gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, because I think overall it's a nice book, and I definitely recommend this to everybody. And I think this is going to be the first time I mention something like this, but I read the introduction and I think that the author says something kind of interesting in the introduction, something that goes along the lines of, you know, this book, when you read it, the author does not exactly like intend it to be like a gay novel or something like that. Now, of course, there is gay content in this book. There is definitely that gay element in it, but the author, the author doesn't really stress that element. He doesn't really stress on this book being a gay fiction, which I think is kind of interesting, because I mean, obviously I read the introduction, so that means the introduction itself is kind of interesting. But yeah, you know, just a little bit of something to talk about. Anyway, if you have read any of the books that I've mentioned in this video, feel free to let me know what you think about them. And yeah, I guess I'll see you again in a totally different video. I'm not sure when that video is going to come. I'm still using data internet, so yeah, my video making is still going to be like, you know, kind of sparse, but I'm still gonna be here, I hope. And I'll see you again. Bye bye, take care.